So I've tried this a couple of times now, and I wouldn't say it's gone horribly wrong, but it hadn't gone really right either. I had a tendency to ramble. I used my hands a lot, even though I knew I was using my hands a lot, and I was trying to stop using my hands a lot. I did what I just did there, where I looked down at my picture on the computer screen instead of up at the green light, as one is supposed to do, so you look like you're looking at the person across the way. Made a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes. More mistakes than I care to make. And even now, I'm messing that crap up. Anyway, hi. My name's Rob. Whatever. It's a fat film guy, because I'm fat and I like movies. And my son thought it was a funny name when he was 6 when we came up with it, the website name. And this is my top 100, the top 100. My top 100, the top 100, the top 100 movies. This is actually the prologue to the top 100 movies. I'm trying not to use my hands nearly as much, but they are going to come into play because I'm me. What is the Fat Film Guy's top 100? Seems like a simple question, right? Because it's just the top 100 movies. But that actually is a little trickier than what it is. There are 4 kinds, let's say, of movie lists. If you go out and you look for a top 100, you can say that the lists are going to fall into one of these 4 categories. One is kind of an educated consensus. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies is probably the most prominent example of that. But a lot of times, if you grab a book like the 500 Movies That Matter, and it's what they've done is they've tabulated from some number of people, kind of done a polling and saying, hey, okay, what's the top 100 movies? And you build the list therefore, and it's kind of the consensus great movies. It's Gone with the Wind, it's Casablanca, it's Citizen Kane, it's so on and so forth. Great movies, one and all. There's value to that list. Obviously, me, an individual, cannot do that because I'm just me. So that is an inherently not individual list. Another kind of list that you'll see is what you kind of call just a sheer tabulation list. And what the important, if you wanted to get into like a definition, the important definition would be what you're tabulating exists independent of your top 100. So for instance, the obvious example would be box office, right? You go to Box Office Mojo and you plug in the top 100 and it's telling you what the top 100 are. But unlike the informed consensus list where somebody was voting on things knowing it was going to be part of a top 100 and kind of in their own mind building a specific thing that was a top 100 and had the attendant weight to it, these were just statistics that grew, you know, and it can be in a lot of different things, right? It can be IMDb, right? You can go to IMDb and you can see their rankings list. Well, you're not ranking the list saying, okay, I'm going to go into IMDb and sign in and I'm going to rank my top 100 movies in order, because you just rank them on a scale. I think it's 1 to 10, or is it 5 stars? I can't remember. It's been a while since I've done one. And then they tabulate everybody that's ranked those movies and find out which movies have the highest rank, you know, using whatever metric they use to get to that number. But it's still, the rankings happen independent of building a top 10 list. You know, Rotten Tomatoes, you could say the same thing, the exact same thing, but just with critics, right? They didn't review this movie thinking, okay, now where is this review going to place it in my top 100? They reviewed it in that movie just for that movie. Sorry, I keep looking out. It's snowing really hard, and I'm going to have to clear my driveway at some point. So the longer it snows, the more pain in the ass, and I've got a really long driveway, so it's a real pain in the ass if it gets snowing. Anyway, I digressed, and this is, by the way, like I said, like my 4th take, and I'm trying not to digress as much, and then this next one is the one I'm really going to try not to digress, because I went on for like 25 minutes about this next part last time I did this, which is absurd, and a lot of ums and So, first 2 lists are valuable, right? Conform consensus list, great. You're going to learn a lot of stuff. You know, it's what your film teacher is going to tell you in film school, the top 100 movies, yada yada yada. Other lists that are tabulated separately, they tell you interesting things about that. They tell you which movie is the most popular that literally got people to go out and spend money in the box office list. You know, what movie put the most butts in the seats? What movie that for people that still like movies enough to go on to IMDb and rank a movie, which movies do those ones are going to get the good rankings on that? You know, same thing with Rotten Tomatoes, and the guy's just reviewing it. How are those lists going to come out? They're all valuable and tell you kind of different things, inform different aspects of this kind of, I don't know, issue. No, discussion, maybe debate sometimes. Either way, the third kind of list that is kind of common and I don't like very much, and I really tried hard to avoid doing, but is maybe if you're just you doing it is the most common list that ends up happening. It's kind of this an intellectually dishonest list, because what ends up happening is you create a list that it's the movies you think are the top 100 movies, and you're kind of imbuing that with a sense of artistic achievement and import, and also with the knowledge of these other lists. You know, I know which ones are rated in AFI, and everybody kind of knows what are the most highly regarded movies. So you might sneak in a movie or two that's a cult classic that you love, but it's really one that everybody kind of loves and stuff like that. But mostly it's just kind of, and you kind of change it because you don't want to just do the AFI list, but you're still hindered by this definition and by this knowledge of what other people think and this reputation of films, of sometimes films that I don't even think when I read them and like read the comments, I don't even think they've seen them, or maybe saw it once, you know, in film school for a minute. And you know, and the lists end up kind of being like network television programming. You know, some of them are good, some of them are just bad, but most of them aren't, because they're coming for something broad in network TV. They're never as pointed as you want them to be. They can't be Breaking Bad or what have you. And those lists are kind of the same thing. They're both going for broad, and they have restrictions, and they have all these different things, and they kind of come up in a way that I don't know what they tell me. They tell me what that person thinks other people think, kind of, and what they think, kind of, and what this thing thinks, kind of, and it's, what's the point? The fourth kind of list. Number 4. Or is it number 4? My son does it, I think, this way now. I don't know. He's learning these new ways to do it in school, and I kind of like some of them. Like he does this for 3. Like they guess to do. For those of you who saw Inglourious Bastards, you know. And then I think he does this sometimes for 3 too, which also works well. Hands look fat. I hope that's not like flipping people off in, you know, South Africa. Like you'd be. I was going to say nobody sees it, but I know with my website I actually have readers from all over the world, which is always surprising and delightful. Where was I? Besides doing that, looking in the damn thing again. Here's where I was. Those first 3 kinds of lists, whatever. My list isn't any of those. I can't do a consensus. I can't do a tabulation. Or if I did, there'd be no value because you could do that yourself. I would just be reprinting other information. And I wanted something that was intellectually honest. So I created my list, which is simply my list. My 100 movies. I just sat down and created my 100 movie list. I didn't give it criteria. I didn't give it anything other than just that. What are my 100 favorite movies, right? Nothing more. Nothing less. You know, and in the end, in a ranking, you can't help but rank some based on how emotionally resonant or important it is to you, and maybe not just pure entertainment, but still, it's just my 100 favorite movies. Now, the guidelines I kind of used to see if I was being intellectually honest about it, there were kind of 4 things I was looking for, that it kind of occurred to me that if I was making a list and I was being truthful, these 4 things would kind of show up. First is that it would have a lot of movies that wouldn't be on anybody else's movie lists. A great example of this is Buckaroo Banzai, right? I love Buckaroo Banzai. I love it for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is it's just damn funny and fun. But also because of when I saw it. Went to a midnight movie, had no expectation of it when I was in college, sat down, it was just me and like 4 buddies, and the rest of the theater was empty. We had no idea what was coming, and we just started laughing our asses off for the next 2 hours. Loved it. My brothers love it. My brother Chuck and I used to like introduce his kids to it and get his kids to watch Buckaroo Banzai. He bought the DVD when his kids were like just little boys. And we'd sit there and we'd just be laughing the whole time and stuff like that. We've introduced it to plenty of people that thought it was stupid, by the way, but that's neither here nor there. So Buckaroo Banzai's got to be on my list. It shouldn't be probably on most other people's lists because it's stupid. And it's got some stupid parts to it. And there's some parts that just don't work plot-wise. And there's all sorts of funny stuff that almost makes it work for me, that I think is really funny, and the special effects are horrible and the makeup's really bad and stuff. And all of it, I love it. Obviously, I think it works great. But if I take a step back and in the abstract look at it, sure, I guess it shouldn't be top 100 material for most people unless you just love it like I do. So those kinds of movies have to be on there, right? It has to be filled with those. Not filled, but have a lot of those movies. The movies you love. Because we don't watch movies in a vacuum. And we don't watch movies with a scorecard. We don't watch movies with a rubric and say, okay, did this movie do this, and this? We're just people watching movies, you know? When I saw the Lego Movie, and the Lego Movie isn't on my list, although it, quite frankly, nearly was, I loved the Lego Movie. But I loved it a lot more because I was sitting next to my 10-year-old son who was like, this is the best thing ever for 2 hours. Because it was made basically for 10-year-old boys above anything else like that. And he just went nuts for it. And then, you know, as any parent knows, if you sit next to your kid and your kid's having that much fun, it just makes it more fun. So that shouldn't be taken out of the equation. That is part of the equation because that's part of what movies are. That's part of what makes movies great is, you know, being the person that discovered it, the person that found it. Or feeling like you're the person that found it, even though you know a lot of other people found it. Being the first one to figure out the crying game. Any of that crap. All that stuff is the things that make film great. And if your list doesn't reflect how personal that is, because those are all personal things, those are all like just the happenstance of when you saw it, where you saw it, who you saw it with, where you were when you saw it, all that other stuff that goes in and feeds to the way we feel about movies. If that's not in there, then it's not. What are you telling me? You're not giving me any insight into you and therefore the movie list and any understanding of what it is. So I knew my movies had to have a lot of that. But I also knew a good top 100 list had to have a lot of classics because they're classics for a reason. You know, it's not... The Godfather isn't great just because it's The Godfather and we all quote it. It's great because it's a great movie. It just works from beginning to end. It is terrifically built. It's beautifully shot. It is just a great movie. So, it should be on there. Not because it is a classic, but because the classics are often great, if that makes any sense. The other thing I knew about it, this is number 3, if you wanted to keep track, is that I was going to have a lot of repeats from different actors and directors and kinds of movies, you know. I'm a child of the 70s, I guess you could say, and then I'm 50 now, so, you know, I went through my earliest years in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. And so I skew Deer Hunter higher than somebody 20 years younger than me might skew Deer Hunter. But more importantly, I kind of hit... Well, scratch the Deer Hunter thing, because that's not the point I was going to make. The point I was going to make was, I am the same, as a child of the 70s and 70s film, I am the same age and love the same movies as guys like Quentin Tarantino and Steven Soderbergh. And a lot of the filmmakers that are, frankly, they're right around my age. We're all around the same age. And they all kind of came out, you know, exploded in the 1990s when we were all... me and those directors in our 20s and going into our 30s. And so all those movies are, you know, I'm going to have more than one Tarantino in my list because I love Tarantino movies. I love Grindhouse. That's how much I love Tarantino movies. I think they're all great. I love Jackie Brown. By the way, neither of those made my list, but my point is, if you're making a list and you're being honest, and you love Tarantino, you should have a lot of Tarantino. You know, my nephew, who's 15, Ryan, who just wrote me, we were having I created book's maybe not the right word, but for my father-in-law's 80th birthday, I created 80 Years of Papa, which is what his grandkids call them, 80 movies, where I went through the last 80 years of film. And I listed the box office champion and the Oscar winner, and then my favorite movie, and then a bunch of other, also nominated kind of movies. And I went through all 80 years. And my nephew has just gotten into Kubrick. He's 15, and I don't know who introduced him to it, probably a teacher at school or something. And he's just now gotten into Kubrick. So he was livid. Like every year that I didn't have that a Kubrick film was out and I didn't have it in, he was screaming to the point where he was offended that I put Raging Bull as the best movie of 1980 over The Shining. Look, I love The Shining, but he was offended to the point like, this is insane. Nobody would do this. I'm like, no, everybody would put Raging Bull just about above The Shining, unless you just love Kubrick and you love The Shining. And that's great, because that's the thing is, if his list was honest, were he to do one, then it should have all Kubrick. Not all Kubrick, because he didn't make that many movies, but you know what I mean. All the Kubrick movies should be in it. If you're a huge Woody Allen fan, you're not just going to have, say, Crimes and Misdemeanors. You're going to have Manhattan, and you're going to have Sleeper, and you're going to have Take It, Money and Run, and you're going to have Annie Hall, and you're going to have blah, 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 blah. You're going to have a ton of Woody Allen, right? You get a ton of Hitchcock if you're a Hitchcock guy. Whatever it is, we have personal tastes. And if it's going to be an honest list where you're making your 100, those personal tastes should come through. And the way they come through isn't by a movie, it's by a lot of movies. As opposed to, and it seems like what a lot of people do, and frankly, I had this inclination sometimes when I was doing it even, so I had to pull myself away from it, is you kind of think, boy, I have Fistful of Dollars and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and The Outlaw Josie Wales. Can I really add whatever? Or I have The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and A Fistful of Dollars. Can I really add Once Upon a Time in America too? All three of them and stuff like that. What about a few dollars more? Is 2 Leone movies enough, or do I need to go with 3? Are 2 Clint Eastwood westerns enough, or can I go to 3 or 4? You kind of start to, and then you have to slap yourself out of it and say, no, if I'm going to be intellectually honest, it doesn't matter. I have to kind of look at it independently. If I love all those movies should be in here if it's going to have any kind of intellectual honesty. And I don't know, maybe it doesn't have to have honesty, frankly. But I wanted to make it have honesty, because honesty seems like it's important. Or really, what the hell's the point with an opinion? And the other thing I realized, and this was realizing it with my number one, so this would be number 4, by the way, if you're keeping track, is that your number one movie, or my number one movie in this case, and if you were doing it, your number one movie, has to be something that is truly personal to you. It's the one movie that sings to you for reasons that have maybe something to do with the quality and something to do with other things. And kind of it all comes together in a way that makes it transcend anything else. I suppose that could be true for Citizen Kane for somebody, but it's not for me. And for most people I know that have watched and like Citizen Kane, if they were really being honest, they like it, they enjoy it, they admire it because it is an admirable effort across the board. They admire its structure because its structure is unique and brilliant. But I don't know that it sings to you. I don't know that it's told you anything important about your life, or it's not the movie that, you always want to watch, and whenever you see it come on, you want to watch. And it doesn't have any of those things that a movie really has. For some filmmakers, I know it does. Spielberg famously has the Rosebud sled in his office. And for some, it really inspired a lot of people. But I can't imagine showing it to my son and his being inspired by it and to become a filmmaker. Maybe he will. But you know what I mean? The number one movie has got to be, it can't just be, I know this is what everybody says is the greatest movie, or there's like some intellectual part of me that kind of just says, this is the pinnacle of film. Because it's not about the pinnacle of film, it's about the pinnacle to you. And it's about the movie that spoke to you, that sings to you, that moves you for reasons that are more often than not entirely about you. That should be your number one. Because that to me is the most honest representation of film and of how you feel about film. So I used those guidelines. I came up with a list. My 100 movies. I know I'm going to get arguments about it. I know people are going to say disagree with me, assuming anybody watches it or reads it. You know. And the big thing I also kept reminding myself is, that's okay. I'm not wrong. And I'm not wrong because it's my list. You know, if we debate about who the greatest quarterback is of all time, we can sit down, and I'm going to say Joe Montana because I was a 49ers fan in the 80s, and so I'm going to say Joe Montana. And XYZ guy might be from Boston, and he's going to say Tommy. And, you know, pick your thing. A Miami guy's going to say Marino. Denver guy's going to say Elway. And we can debate it all day, and we can pull our hair out, and we can scream, and we can quote statistics, and we can quote Super Bowl championships, and we can do all this other stuff. And ultimately, we can never know. But here's the thing, and this is the difference between sports and movies. Theoretically, there's an answer. There's inherent to sport is competition. Inherent to sport is that one is better than the other. So I can't know necessarily because I couldn't put in a controlled experiment where I had John Elway and Joe Montana and Dan Marino and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers and yada, 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 all in the exact same scenario with the exact same receivers, with the exact same offensive line, going against the exact same competition to see exactly who was better. That's an impossible thing. So knowing who's better isn't possible. It's an unknowable, but it's an unknowable truth. It's an unknowable thing that actually is. There is an answer. You know, there is an answer of who's better at basketball at their peak, LeBron James or Michael Jordan. We can't possibly know what the answer is, even if we think we do. And I think I do. Yes, I'm an old man, so I'm going to say Michael Jordan. We can't know, though. It's impossible to know. But there is an answer, right? Like, theoretically, one of them really was better than the other. There'd be a way, I don't know how you could create the experiment, but because competition, because they're striving to be better than one another, one of them theoretically is. That's at kind of the core of sports argument. It kind of fuels it a little bit, which is lovely, and makes it so, you know there is a right answer, even though you can never get to the answer, and makes it fun. But film is inherently different. There is no right answer. There is no vacuum or experiment, hypothetical or otherwise, unknowable or otherwise, that I can create that can tell me whether or not Casablanca is a better movie than The Godfather. Can't be done. Because, ultimately, there isn't a better or worse. There's a what sings to you more. Which one do you put higher? And that's it. And because of that, your list isn't wrong if you create a list. It's your list. And yeah, nobody. If there was another person on the planet Earth that agreed with my top 100 and its order all the way through, that would blow my mind. Because here's the other truth. Little inside baseball-y crap. I did this 2 years ago, where I created the list. My son asked me to do it, and I took almost all summer to do it. It was so laborious. I went through and I had to pull up every movie from every year, and I had to kind of do my own little internal AFI thing where I was nominating for myself every year, and I filled an entire notebook of notes on movies and movies like this and movies like that, and crossed them out and had to rewatch a couple that I hadn't seen in years, and all this other stuff. And I came up with the list, and it was great. It was fabulous. And then I started to write on my website. I wrote a terrific article that actually mirrors this a little bit about how you make a movie list and what you should do to do it, because I made quite a few, and how you go about it, make an honest one, blah, 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 blah. All ready to start doing my list. I was kind of going to do it a little bit like I'm doing this video thing, but in written form. I was going to watch the movie, write about it, plop it on the website. 100 days later, all the movies would be on there. Wonderful game plan. Never did it. And actually then I stopped writing for a little bit. Had some things happen and stuff like that. Stopped writing. Nothing serious. But then I'm looking for it maybe 5-6 months later, and lost it. I once wrote an entire novel, by the way. This is 30 years ago, 25 years ago. I wrote a whole novel. I put it onto a disc. I lost that disc, and it was the only copy of the novel, and I still never even tried to rewrite it. Never even tried to go back to the story. Just gone the way of the wind. Partially because the novel probably wasn't very good. But same thing happened with this list. Lost the binder. Can't find it anywhere. So I redid the list. Fueled a little bit by that 80 Years of Papa, 80 Movies thing. So it was a similar process, truncated admittedly, but a similar process going through those 80 years of movies. So it kind of primed me, and it made doing this list a much easier thing. And also, actually, frankly, having gone through it 2 years ago. So I did the list, and I showed my son. And my son has a freakish memory. And he was like, oh, well, that one's not the same. Oh, well, that one's not. Oh, you didn't have this one before. Oh, that one's in a different place. Oh, this one. Oh, you moved that one way up. Oh, you moved that one way down. And what I realized, not that I didn't kind of know it, but what that drove home to me, is if I did this exercise 100 times, if I decided to every month, the last week of every month, I was going to create my top 100 movies. And I went through and I did it for 100 weeks. I would have, literally, I don't even think this is an exaggeration, I would have 100 unique lists. Every single one would be different. Some just in order, most just different movies, because there's probably 100 movies that I could have easily put into my top 100 that aren't there, that I could have talked myself into and not even felt guilty about it, because that's not, could literally argue that they should be in there, kind of a thing. So it's going to be different. So if I'm right and yet I'm wrong, because there is no right answer. So I'm right in that in the moment I did this was my top 100. And since I can't even agree with it, I certainly can't be offended that nobody else can agree with it, nor have an expectation that anybody else would agree with it entirely. I wouldn't even want everybody else to agree with it entirely, because then nobody would yell at me about it. And I love it when people yell at me about movies and talk to me about movies and suggest movies that I had forgotten and go, how can you rank this above that and this above that and this above that and this above that? Prefer it when they don't feel like saying, in order to make the movie they want higher, to say that movie's crap, but that's neither here nor there. That's because I'm an old man and negativity's starting to bug me in my old age. But the discussion about it, you're an idiot, this is a better movie, I'm in. 150% or whatever exaggerated percentage you want to go with. I love that. And that's okay, because you can yell all you want, it doesn't change it. It doesn't change its rightness or wrongness or anything in between. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope this wasn't too long, and I hope I actually do it. And this doesn't become like the list last time, where I wrote a nice little piece, put it up on my website, never listed one movie. So hopefully next week I will put in the first movie in the top 100, number 100, little preview for it, like whatever, tease, is that what they call it on the radio? It is, if not the best martial arts movie of all time, it is certainly the most influential martial arts movie of all time, starring the most iconic martial artist of all time, the great Bruce Lee. I think you know what it is. Enter the Dragon. Boards don't hit back. Yes, I was getting my mouse to stop the thing.